All right, guys. So today we're going to have a presentation around perfectionism, which is something that I know a lot of us may struggle with. Some of us don't. Others do more than others. But I just thought, we could kind of discuss this together as a group and learn from it. And there was also some really good sources I found around different types of perfectionism that I thought we could discuss together. So the first thing is, so what does perfectionism mean? I always like to just refer to Google as it's kind of a good source for everything. And the term perfectionism, according to Google, was refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. Now, think about that for a second. Any standard short of perfection. So, perfectionism is perfect, right? But is perfect actually attainable? That is the big question. Perfect is impossible. Nothing will ever be perfect. So, we have to accept that, right? So, I struggle with this personally. And, in my own life, an example of how I've struggled with perfection is I always feared that the final product would be either subpar, embarrassing, someone would think less of me, or honestly just think that I'm not capable of doing anything right. So what would end up happening was I would honestly just sit on it and just kind of let it sit for about a week, 2 weeks, and then just like shut my eyes and hit send, right? And just not really have confidence in the final product. And that actually led me to not being able to execute to the level that I was capable of. So perfectionism actually held me back significantly. And I say in my younger years, I'm not that old or anything, but in the beginning part of my career. So, but it definitely did impact me in a negative way. So, I learned a ton from that. And now I've just kind of learned to cope with it and just kind of throw it out there and see what happens and hope for the best. And we can always shift and change things as needed. So, and I think that's something that actually in our culture is really awesome that we have ingrained in us, that it's okay to not be perfect the first go around. We can make adjustments, and it's okay not to have it all make sense the first round. And we'll go through that in a little bit here, around 70% and go. So with that being said, I just wanted to ask you guys to get some participation here. Who here believes they struggle with perfection, and how do you think it helps or hurts you? So maybe a couple of us can just share your experiences with perfection and how it's impacted you.
I used to struggle with perfection, but now I'm perfect. Sorry.
Nothing short from Tom.
I think it depends on the situation when it comes to perfection, or perfectionism. Like some, like not that it's something where it's like, I don't care, I'll just fire it off. But maybe it's like in some way, it's like you're trying to make up for a lack of confidence. So like if you feel confident in it, you're not going to sit there and try to overanalyze and try and achieve that level of perfection. And you're like, I feel good about this. It's good. But if you lack the confidence, or like you were saying, I think if producing something that somebody's going to laugh at, I think that's a lack of confidence issue mostly. Like so you overcompensate with trying to be perfect on it, but yeah. So I think it can come up with different scenarios. It's not just like a person specific thing. It might be like a task specific thing.
Yeah, personally, I mean, I struggle with perfectionism. I always have, like in school, especially where, I'm taking a test or writing an assignment and I just dwell on it because I want it to be as like good as it can be, and almost like I've always looked at it as it's kind of hurt me because it takes way longer to do things, and I overanalyze everything I do. And so by not just like going for it and having the confidence to like get things done and not fear the regret or fear the failure, it hurts me because I feel like I could be way more productive with my time and managing how much I get done, and then also just not living with the constant weight on my shoulders that like it has to be perfect, because I feel like that part of it too is mentally draining when you're constantly overthinking everything you do. And like, even when you send something in, it's like, oh, did I, could that have been better? And so it's a constant mental game as well. So I've always felt like, I mean, there are the perks of, yes, you want to be like a high achiever, but there's a line that I feel like can be crossed where it just ends up hurting you more.
Great word. That was really awesome. Thank you. Wow, that was great. So now we'll kind of go into the problem with perfectionism, and you guys shared great examples. Thank you. Some people wear the perfectionist label with a badge of honor, where it's, hey, perfection is all I will ever produce, and that's the standard. It's like, that's all I can do is perfect. And having high standards for yourself is great. That's great. We appreciate that, but nothing will ever be 100% perfect. So the people that will say, hey, if it's not perfect, don't send it to me, that's honestly just impacting them and your own growth too. So you'll never have full confidence in what you produce. So I wouldn't say it's worth that badge of honor. I think the badge of honor comes with the effort put in, and the seeking feedback to improve is where the badge of honor really comes in. Being receptive to feedback is the key to getting closer to perfection. So one thing that's really unique about our culture, and I think it goes hand in hand with, not focusing on perfection, is the fact that we have the principle of 70% and go. How many times have you sat at the computer for endless time just trying to simply start something? And that's honestly the hardest part sometimes, is just starting. So once you get started, you start a flow, you start thinking of different ideas, and your mind gets churning, which is always a positive thing to get things going. And sometimes you honestly just have to start to move forward. Accept that nothing will be perfect, and especially the first go around. So there's a lot of times where, let's just say Dave asked me for something, and I kind of put something together just to get a starting point. I send it to Dave and I say, hey, this is just my first draft. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out how to make it better if this isn't what we're looking for. So just having the permission for 70% has actually really helped me personally grow, and I'm sure it's helped you guys grow in a lot of different ways too, because you don't have that much pressure to submit something that is absolutely 100% there. So I think 70% and go is one of the greatest things we can have in our culture, just because it eliminates that stress. So there's a lot of types of perfection that I found through some research. One of the types was the self-oriented perfectionism. And that means you have unrealistic expectations of yourself and holding punitive self-evaluations. That's more like you are so hard on yourself that no matter what you do, it's never going to meet your own expectations. So you're basically getting in your own way, is what it defines itself in my words. You'll just never be able to meet your own expectations. So you have a perfectionist personality, and a lot of us do. There's also socially prescribed perfectionism. Others will judge you harshly, believe you must be perfect to get approval from others. That is more like when you're out and about and you have confidence issues because you feel like people might look at the way you're dressed and it's not perfect to what the event requires, or maybe the people around you have a lot of harsh words that they share of you, or you feel that way. So there's some social tension there. And then there's also other oriented perfectionism, which is individuals impose unrealistic standards on those around them and evaluate them critically. Other oriented actually scares me the most, just because that's usually in the workplace. You could produce a product that might not meet your manager's standards and they let you hear it, and that only creates more trouble. So I think out of all these, if I was to rate 1 to 3, I would say, self-oriented is 1, or other oriented would be 2nd, and then socially would be 3rd. Because I think you can work through socially just by building confidence in different ways, but also other oriented isn't always in your hands. Other oriented is kind of almost controlled by other people in your environment. So that's why whenever we talk about culture, it's so important that we don't fall into that trap, and we accept our 70% and go, and we live by it. So I was going to ask you guys, what type of perfection stood out to you and why? And I'll go back to that slide so we can kind of talk through them here.
Hi, my name is Michelle, and I am a recovering perfectionist. And thank you. I would say what stood out to me was the self-oriented, because like for me, I can sometimes hear this ugly voice in my head that says, well, if they find out, if they only knew that you weren't actually that good at this, then, that would be damaging to my self-worth, And so I think that definitely falls into the self-oriented category, where I just have these unrealistic expectations of like, I should be perfect at all these different kinds of things, when in reality, nobody else holds that standard over me, and it's totally crippling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
For me, it's a reminder once again that I'm a terrible parent and it's other oriented. And I agree with you, Michelle, also, like that, because the self-oriented is big, but man, like other oriented, it's like we were having a conversation with the kids last night on homework, and they were kind of like, oh, I need 100% on the test, 100% on the test, and like, oh, don't miss anything. And I'm sitting there in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh man, like that's a heavy burden. It's all like, we need to obviously like do your homework, take the time to do that right. But when it comes to the test, like we don't expect perfection. We expect you to learn the stuff, and if you miss one, and even like at least get in the car the other day, William's like, I got 100% on my test, and Elise says, I missed one, and she looks so sad. It's like that's really good. I mean, like I'd be happy if I got one right on a test. That other oriented, it's like a cascade, because other oriented then goes to self-oriented, and then really like the socially prescribed is more like people trying to protect themselves. Like if I point out somebody else's mistakes, nobody's going to see mine, and you're really just coping with self-oriented perfectionism at the same time there too. So, but thanks for reminding me I'm a terrible parent, Dan. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Tom. Okay.
Something else that stood out to me, like after you going through these different kind of categories, the socially prescribed one, I kind of feel like social media has heightened that a lot, just because there's these standards now for like, I feel like a lot of the things we do, and I feel like today's culture, it's like social media can put on such a front, and like this is how, this like buy this house, you'll have this house and it'll look like amazing and clean all the time, and you set these standards in your head that are very unrealistic, but you're seeing everybody's highlight reel on social media, and so in your head you're constantly setting these standards for what everything should be like, and I feel like it's so like subconscious, and you don't realize how I mean personally I don't realize how influenced I am by it. But I feel like that's kind of a good example of like a socially prescribed like perfectionism mindset. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on.
Really a good point, Mackie. Just it reminds, I mean, and social media does that. This has been going on for a long time, even pre that, with just magazines and airbrushing and all this other stuff that you can do to look a certain way, or you look at Hollywood and just how the characters look on there, and they the amount of hours that are spent to like look a certain way on the screen, or the angle or whatever. And I just the undergirding a lot of this is obviously fear, but when you said that, Mackie, it made me think there's another danger to it, which is envy. You start getting into sort of this envious kind of like, well, perfectionism can also be fed by envy, like that. And so then you just start doing things that you shouldn't, and it just the distinguishing factor really is like who I am versus what I do. When you get into perfectionism, you're starting to say this is who I am, and versus this is what I do, and it might be okay, it might not, but the danger is just the cloaking that you can do to make it who you are. It's dangerous. So.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's actually Mackie thought ahead, because there was a slide about social media coming up. So good stuff. Outsmarted the system. I love it. that's great examples, guys. Thank you for your participation. So there's definitely some ways that we can heal from perfectionism. Recognizing you can hold yourself to a high standard without expecting perfection 100% of the time. It's like you don't always have to be perfect to be accepted or to accept yourself. Even anyone we value for who you are. Everyone is a person, right? So we have to value each other for who we are and how we were made. Let go of the need to compare yourself to others. That's where I think social media, as far as the next point goes, is, there's a lot of ways that social media can allow us to think, why don't I have this? Or why am I not like this? Or I'm watching this show right now, just funny enough, on Netflix. It's called Dubai Bling. And it was just kind of funny because it was a Middle Eastern reality show. And there was a guy in there that was going to have a surgery to have a six-pack, right? So why would you need that? And so it was just like, okay, like you really have to have a surgery for that. But that's just an example of the need to compare yourself to others. He probably has friends that have six-packs and he doesn't, and he wants to get one. So he's not willing to put in the effort to get there, but he'll just get a surgery. So anyways, have gratitude for your gifts and those around you. We are all made in a unique way, and we have a ton to offer each other, and we can support each other. It's leveraging each other's strengths and protecting each other's weaknesses too. Look at mistakes and challenges as a way to grow. It's okay not to be perfect, and even if we mess up, how many of you have messed up and not learned from that mess up? And that's the whole idea, is we grow from challenges, and life isn't always going to be easy. So we just have to be accustomed to messing up every now and then and celebrating the accomplishments later that we learn from that. So I have a challenge for you guys. I would like to challenge you guys to think of a project you haven't started because you're worried it won't be perfect. Once you have that project in mind, share with one of your teammates. And this could be a project that has nothing to do with work. Like I have one right now that there's a fireplace set up in my backyard. There's a bunch of wood that's going to splinter someone in the rear if they sit on it. So I'm trying to find the energy and the time to actually go and like cut up that board and, put it out front or whatever. But I just honestly haven't done anything because I don't know what I'm going to do with that space after. So I honestly have just kind of sat it there and just stared at it until I figured out what goes there next. And it's almost like I need to just cut up these boards, put them out front, so the garbage guys will pick it up, and then maybe I'll be inspired while I'm doing it to find what goes next. So there's my example. So I think tomorrow I'm just going to honestly get out of bed and start getting to work. So that's going to be my way of overcoming it. So feel free to share ideas with your teammates, or if you want to share one now, feel free to. But I think that, the biggest thing is, you matter to me here. How can we support our teammates and provide encouragement to move to 70% and go? It also will give you peace of mind too. And that's what we aim for here. So I want to thank you guys. I have my sources below. I didn't want to copyright and then get fired. So it's a big deal.